Hey everyone, how are you doing? Got a little Led Zeppelin going on. And anyway, so that's the thing to do, Always have a song in your head and always have one in your heart. You'll be fine. So welcome everybody. Let me just speak favor over everyone. Hope you had a great holiday, great Christmas, however you celebrated. And let me just welcome you here and thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of the conversation, part of the thing. And this is a great, hey, Twisted Isby, how you doing? Pamela, Sarah, Bear, how are you? Susie Q, good to see you. Grandpa Brian, Blanca, good to see you. Victor, hey, David, how are you? Emperor Rex, boy. Hope everyone is doing good. Christopher Bryden, good to see you. Eyes of the Maelstrom, hello. Think agape love forever. And hello, Sarah, Scotty, and Grandpa, and all the rest of Nina the Mystic, hello. So good to see y'all. Well, we made it through another one. And now we head on into the rest of this year and see what 2020. Speaking of 2020, tonight over on the Steiger Perspective, artistfirst.com, radio network, 10 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Mountain. Figure out where your time zone is. Be doing predictions for 2020. Yeah. Tune in. You're going to enjoy it. I always like reading the predictions, and everyone should make a prognostication as well. Hey, Laura, good to see you. Hello, Lois. Good to see you. Hello, Julianne Payne from Down Under. So good to see you. Let me take care of something right here. I think I got that right. All right. Boy, watching my own self coming and going. Hello. Who's driving this bus? I am. So I want to tell you something. What we're about to get into, this was probably, it ranked up there in the top 3 most watched this year. And it's one that invoked a lot of email. It's one that invokes a lot of, well, depending on where you stand on it, can either be very disruptive to your cognitive reasoning, or it can do what it did for me, set you free. I did, this whiteboard you see at the top, I leave that on there because that's like 5 years old up there, but there's a reason why I leave it. Because that's where I did all of my research and determining and coming to the firm foundational conclusion, no ambiguity. There is no such thing as the devil. There's no such thing as Satan. There's no such thing as Lucifer. It's all made up. Every bit of it. And when you start looking into it, when you find out that they made this up, how much more of the store did they make up? Because listen, what we're going to find out today, this is the biggest open deception and lie of humanity. Yet humanity continues to believe this nonsense. And most people live their lives in utter fear, stark terror of something that doesn't exist. How sad is that? So let's get on to it. It is a long program, just warning you ahead of time. But if you stick with it, you're going to be a hell of a lot smarter than those around you who believe in this nonsense. And nonsense it is. There is no Satan or Lucifer. It is an historical fiction. Most people don't know what historical fiction is. Well, most of us live it. Historical fiction takes a story with a fictional characters that is set in a real time in history. And they do it so cleverly. The entire New Testament is a fraud in fact that it was not written when they say it was. It is, in fact, the stories are not true. But you are convinced, and they'll show you the archaeological evidence that validates the existence of this time. And no, you use those archaeological bits and pieces to add to your fictional history. It's a historical fiction. And once you begin to realize how this has been, so every religion uses it. It's a fact. Now, if you hear something back, we're watching our daughter's dog. So, Rocket, sit down. He's sticking to me like glue. All right. Better get hurt by the truth than comforted with a lie. Think about it. The truth is there is no Lucifer or Satan. You see that? You see people worship this. You see people get all freaked out and all spooky. And you got the ghost hunters that, oh, I feel that the devil is in here. You know what? They got their heads so far up their rectum that the gray matter has been replaced by fecal matter. What they're really doing is hype themselves up to where a mouse could let a fart and they'll jump up through the roof. That's what happens. There is no higher reality than truth, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to know what the highest form of reality is, it's truth. It's a fact. But here is the fact. The reality of the truth becomes this. Whose version of the truth do you believe? Theirs or yours? You're smart enough to realize you can do this. The answers are here. We live in this age of information. It is truly the second renaissance of the golden era. We have access to wisdom. We have access to knowledge. Now, the problem is it's that it's well saturated with, well, how should we say, irregularities. So here's the thing. Relearn to question everything again as you did when you first arrived. You know, we get into this, and this is what I challenge myself. This is why I go into places most will not. Lilith. I love the gal, you know. And boy, I'll tell you what, my name is spurned where, you know, how dare you teach that heresy? Hey, if the personification lived, she was screwed over. She's owed a debt. And I think the lady needed to have her story told. So anyway, reality is easy. Deception, that's the hard work when you get to it. I want to say this to you right up front. You are under no legal obligation to any god or gods, or God, small g, commandments, or any religious rules, laws, etc. You have to understand that. No human is obligated to any god, unless you choose to do so without coercion. Now, if you go there as a matter of free will, well, then, you know, you are where you are, and you can expect cause and effect. That's all I can say. So deception. Deception is an intentional act in which senders knowingly transmit messages to foster a false belief or interpretation by the receiver. The act of causing someone to accept as true or valid what is false or invalid. The act of deceiving, resorting to falsehood and deception. By the book. We have no idea what we believe because most of it is wrong. And this is the reality check. So here's the question of the hour. So which God has murdered and killed more Homo sapiens, humans, the God of the Bible or Lucifer? We shall find out. Let me just say this. As vilified as Hitler was, he never killed a single person. That rule applies to very many popular religions today. So have you made a guess? Give up? All right. So we're going to put this in historical context. The word Satan, Baphomet, Lucifer. You know, we're so ignorant. We all roll this up into one. In the days of the Old Testament, Satan with a small s was a general term for that which was opposed or adverse. It means enemy, adversary. The angel of the Lord that stood in the way of Balaam and his donkey is called a Satan against Balaam. Go in the Old Testament, Numbers 22:32. God raises up Hadad of Edom as a Satan against Solomon, 1 Kings 11:14. God raises up individuals, nations, and spiritual entities as Satans numerous times for various adversarial purposes. One, such as 1 Samuel 29:4. In this way, a Satan is just a generic term for an adversarial role. To this day, much of Jewish tradition believes Satan to be an evil inclination of humans and having no power except through humans, yours, ours, evil actions. Time to take off the training wheels and learn to accept a few things. Now, everyone gets their panties wrapped in a wad because they'll go to this one place in the Bible, Isaiah 14:12. Now, here you have to understand, you're being set up. The Bible, the Quran, the Vedic, all of them, they don't work unless you have an antithesis to your supposed savior or hero or God. If they have no enemies, then you have no religion. All right. The book of Job is the first place the word Satan, give me 1 second, I want to do something here real quick. There we go. Is used in an actual personified way, because this is a parable using an adversarial archetype as a main character. However, every time this character is mentioned in Job, it appears with the article the in front of it, as in the Satan, or literally the adversary, as a generic descriptive term. Although English Bibles capitalize the word Satan in Job, as well as leaves the article the off, you see how they did this? It's clear deception, but wait till we get into this deeper. It is clear that the Satan is not meant as a personal name, because Hebrew never puts, you ready, the article the in front of a personal name, ever. And in the Hebrew text, the appears in front of the word Satan in Job every time without exception. In the Hebrew tradition, all things, both evil and good, came from the hand of God. The Satan then represented God's destructive agency. No other deity, no other personification. It is the God that the Christian and the Hebrew, and I'll go ahead and say it, the Islam world worships. The Satan is that part of God that is destructive. It's kind of a prosecuting attorney appointed by God, who watched for those who did not obey the law so he could accuse and punish them on God's behalf. Now you know where the term two-faced comes from. In this way, the adversary was not evil per se. He just fulfilled God's destructive will. The Satan, therefore came to be known as the accuser. And that is referenced many times in the the New Testament, the accuser of the brethren. Remember, they had to make this up. You had to have a character that represented all of this. In those days, the Satan was not the wicked, demonic idea of a being that he is now. Those conceptual demonic entities were more along the lines of gods such as Baal and Moloch. And we know where they came from. We've read those apocryphas. And other malevolent pagan deities to whom people participated in bizarre rituals and human sacrifice. During all this time, the serpent of Genesis was not yet equated to Satan. This is fact, folks. This is seminary fact. This is theology fact. In the New Testament, the personification of the Satan as a character is as follows. An apocalyptic writing became more popular in the intertestamental, and you remember, intertestamental period. Folks, the Bible, you have to understand, people think that damn thing's been around forever. It hasn't been. There was so much confusion for over 300 years. People didn't know what they believed. Anyway, that it was during this period, such as the books of Enoch and this genre of literature, predominantly imagined as the archetypal enemy and personification of evil. Thus, the generic adversarial title, the Satan, evolved into the personal name Satan, capital S, and came to be seen in a more diabolical sense. There is also the ancient deity Mot, who was the foundation of the modern day beliefs that a devil, Satan, and Lucifer actually exist. So from the Old Testament to the New Testament, we see the Satan, small s, conceptually evolved from the adversarial agency of God, through which God exercises his destructive will, to a demonic enemy of God, whom God has come to defeat. You see, the Shakespearean play is well established now. Even the most inept individual can gain and understand this basic concept. This was to solidify the progressive breaking off of this satanic adversarial element from our concept of God. Jesus, which is, by the way, not the actual name of another deception, was to refine our understanding of God and exposed the adversarial destructive agency as opposed to God instead of part of God. Clear delineation. It was so subtle, virtually all the people have missed it. It changed the whole dynamics of what God is. For you see, God is the accuser and the destroyer of Homo sapiens. He is not the father and the giver of life as portrayed. God of the Bible is, in fact, the Satan devil. He is both. Get used to it, sweetheart, because that's the reality. Now, you've got the drama and the story with all its characters, but the very essence of what this is all about is that this God is both God and Satan. Not until later centuries did the small Satan begin being equated with Lucifer, which means morning star, and comes from a prophecy about an earthly king of Babylon in Isaiah 14:12. We saw it. This is the biggest freaking deception, folks, and you're going to learn how it was pulled off. Like the unbiblical doctrine of the rapture is not biblical. It's, again, because Christianity today is a new religion. It's less than 500 years old. All right, and so that's why they've incorporated the rapture. And I was caught up in that bullshit for decades. And, you know, they made whole movies. I know Tim LaHaye. And it's a travesty because it's mental abuse is what it is, which was developed in the 1800s. Yeah, the rapture whole concept was developed in the 1800s and was novel enough to become indoctrinated into multitudes within 200 years. And power of tradition turned Morning Star, the earthly king of Babylon, into Lucifer, a pre-existent spiritual being who wanted to become like God and fell. However, here is the greatest deception ever perpetrated upon humanity. At some point, as time progressed, it just became a fact that Satan, small s, was always the fallen angel who rebelled against God in pre-existent times. People will often point to Revelations 12, 7, and 9, which again is a fallacy, folks. That is not a prophecy. It is a fallacy of a deranged individual. But anyway, to defend the idea that Satan was a pre-existent angel who fell. But that scripture has no ties to Isaiah 14 about the king of Babylon, nor does it mention any type of fall of a good angel. Rather, it is about the deceiver and accuser being cast down and losing his place in authority in an actual earth kingdom, not heavenly. So the question becomes, who is Lucifer then? I mean, more people are just so freaked out about this character. I've told you, I wish the character lived. I'd love to meet with him. To me, it would be an honor to be able to sit and break bread with such a magnificent being. But sadly, it doesn't exist. So you can see here how they've begun to change this. Many modern translators of the Bible know this. And so they have quietly exited out the word Lucifer. However, in the King James Version, there it is. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Folks, I was so wrapped up in that for decades. I mean, I'd have given my life for the fact of saying that it existed. And now you can see how the New International Version has taken that out completely. No. They don't want no Lucifer in there because they have people like me that would accuse them of continuing to perpetrate this fraud, which they're continuing to do. But anyway, so Lucifer makes his appearance in the 14th chapter of the Old Testament book of Isaiah, where the 12th verse, and nowhere else. And you just read that, how thou have fallen, O Lucifer. The first problem is, folks, that Lucifer is a Latin name. Now, how the hell did you get a Latin name from the Hebrew? It's not Hebrew or any other ancient language. There's your first problem. So how did it find its way into a Hebrew manuscript written before there was a Latin Roman language? To find the answer, a scholar at the library of the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati gave his answer. What the Hebrew name was Satan, given in this chapter of Isaiah, which describes the angel who fell from the ruler of heaven or hell. It doesn't exist. Here it is. In the original Hebrew text, the 14th chapter of Isaiah is not about a fallen angel. It's about a fallen Babylonian king who's during his lifetime, persecuted the children of Israel. They weren't Jews. They weren't even Hebrews at this point. They were the children of Israel. Most people don't realize that there were 3 metamorphoses of this race of people. It contains no mention of Satan, either by name or reference. The Hebrew scholar could only speculate that some early Christian scribes, writing in the Latin tongue used by the church, had decided for themselves that they wanted the story to be about a fallen angel, a creature not even mentioned in the original Hebrew text, and to whom they gave the name Lucifer. Oh, it gets better. So how'd this happen? All right, so here we go, folks. Now you're going to get the real history. In 382 AD, Pope Damascus commissioned the scholar Jerome to make an official revision of the many Latin versions of the Bible that were floating around in the Catholic Church at the time. Folks, they said literally hundreds. False letters, I mean, what they had to regurgitate it, reformulate it. You know, here's a fact. They tried to put 3 other gods in there until they got the Jewish God. And they know that most of the people were going to be so ignorant of Jewish culture that by the time that they were told this, because no Bible was around, folks. You may have had stories, you may have had pieces, but there was no Bible. All right, so Jerome went off to a cave in Bethlehem, where he proceeded to make his translation. The Old Testament, part of which he supposedly based on the Hebrew text. So he's living in this cave, right? And the Pope, the church, is funding him. He doesn't have to worry about paying the rent. He doesn't have to worry about food or anything else. That's all being provided. So he's living in this cave, and now he's undertaking the task of translating the Greek Septuagint. So we're going to get this. But in practice, Jerome based his Old Testament very largely on the Greek language, the Septuagint version of what we call the LXX of the Old Testament, which Origen had produced about 140 years earlier in Caesarea. Where do we know Origen from? The Liber Lilith. Yeah. All right. So AD 450, Jerome had completed his work, which we today now know as the Latin Vulgate Bible. It is far from a particularly accurate translation of the original text. Excuse me. Rather, it is an interpretation of thought. Ladies and gentlemen, in the classroom today, this is critically important because you see, I could literally take a whole book and completely reinterpret it, and it would be considered accurate. Why? Because it was an interpretation of thought put into idiomatic, graceful Latin. But an interpretation of thought is only good when the translator has a perfect understanding of the thoughts he is translating. Yeah, think about that one. But if a translator has a flawed understanding of the thoughts he is trying to translate, then his interpretation of thoughts results in a very flawed and misleading translation. For 1,000 years, this Vulgate translation was without a rival. It was the Dark Ages, ladies and gentlemen. Millions of people were being put to the sword, hung, tortured by the church. They didn't have the books. They would only get the books by the emissaries of the Holy See. And herein lies the problem. The Latin Vulgate translation was the only version of the Bible available to people of Europe during the period of time. There was no possibility for anyone to compare the Vulgate with any other translation. They didn't exist, whether it be Hebrew or Greek manuscripts. Jerome understood that Isaiah 14:12 is talking about Satan. You see, he was convinced. There, the Hebrew word Hallel is used for Satan, and Jerome translated this into Latin as Lucifer. Now, this gets complicated. This is a mistranslation, folks. The Latin word Lucifer is made up from 2 Latin words. These 2 words are lux, which is light, ferus, which is to bear or carry. Thus, the name Lucifer means, in the Latin language, light bearer or light bringer. But this is not what the Hebrew word Hallel means. Shortly, we will see exactly what this Hebrew word Hallel does mean. Anyway, as a result of this Latin Vulgate translation, which was virtually the only version of the Bible in use throughout Europe for the next 1,000 years, Satan popularly became known as Lucifer. This identity for Satan with the name Lucifer was established throughout Europe by the church long before there ever was a translation into English language. You had 1,000 years, ladies and gentlemen, 100 generations nearly. 50. By then, it's spoken word of God, and you would be burned at the stake for saying otherwise. It should be clear that when the first people to translate the Bible into English came along, one of their paradigms was the name Lucifer applied to Satan. When they came to translate Isaiah 14:12 into English, they decided that, well, rather than actually translate the Hebrew word Hallel, they would simply substitute it with the already well-known Latin name Lucifer. Lazy son of a bitches. And because of that, they have screwed mankind for over 1,000 years into delusional beliefs. You see how this goes? Get down, Rocket. And they could do this because on the surface, this seems to be a reasonable, accurate translation, but it isn't really accurate at all. So to summarize thus far, it was the Catholic Church who assigned the name Lucifer to Satan. This Latin word is supposedly a translation of the Hebrew noun Hallel used in Isaiah 14:12. But Lucifer was not an original way of mistranslating the Hebrew word Hallel. Rendering the Hebrew word Hallel into Latin as Lucifer was simply copying the precedent set in the Greek language of the Septuagint, and its translation. You see how this gets, and it becomes, established fact. The Greek Septuagint, had translated Isaiah 14:12 into Greek as Ephorus, an older way of spelling the Greek word phosphorus. So the reason why Jerome mistranslated Hallel as Lucifer is because centuries earlier, in the Greek, it had already been mistranslated to begin with. Hallel as phosphorus. The Greek word phosphorus and the Latin word Lucifer mean absolutely 100% the same thing. Absolutely. It's light. Light. In their respective languages, both these words mean light bearer or light bringer. They are just as identical as are the English words bread and the German word Brot, or the English word knife and the German word Messer. Phosphorus and Lucifer are completely identical in meaning. They just mean light, not the spooky head goat thing and everything else. No. So the word Lucifer is a perfect translation into Latin of the Greek word phosphorus, light. This means that Jerome perfectly translated into Latin the Greek word in the interpretations of Isaiah 14:12, but Jerome made no attempt to correctly translate the word Hallel into Latin. He just left it. Jerome simply latched onto the mistranslated Greek version of Isaiah, while totally ignoring the ramifications of this way of translating Isaiah 14:12 into Latin. Now, the Greek text, in the Greek language, the text of the Old Testament, the word phosphorus, actually it's the older version, ephorus, is used 7 times. Phosphorus is in fact used to translate 6 different words into Greek. They are the 6 scriptures. Here they are. 1 Samuel 37. The Greek word phosphorus represents the word neshpheth, which means twilight. In the Latin Vulgate, this is rendered as vesper. The Latin vesperus, means evening. In Job 3:9, the Greek word phosphorus represents the Hebrew word alpha, which means eyelids, and by extension, dawn. The King James rendering of the dawning of the day is rendered in the Jewish translation as the eyelids of the morning. In the Latin Vulgate, this is rendered as aurora. The Latin aurora, means dawn, or daybreak, or sunrise. In Job 11:17, the Greek word phosphorus represents the Hebrew word bogar, which means morning or daybreak. In the Latin Vulgate, this Hebrew word here is rendered as Lucifer. No boogeyman, no hell, none of that nonsense. Now, in Job 38:12 and in 41:18, the Greek word phosphorus represents the Hebrew word shakar, which means dawn or dayspring. In the Latin Vulgate, in Job 38:12, it is rendered as delusio, and in Job 41:18, which is Job 41:9 in the Vulgate, it is rendered as delusio. The Latin delusium and delusii means lesser and break of day and dawn. In Psalms 110:3, the Greek word phosphorus represents the Hebrew word mishkar, which means dawn. In the Latin Vulgate, this Hebrew word is rendered by the adjective luciferum, which means light bringer. In Isaiah 14:12, the Greek word phosphorus represents the Hebrew word hael. Here, we will see the meaning of this word later, but in the Latin Vulgate, this is rendered as Lucifer, which means light bringer. You see how it begins to work? So what we have here, you can see how one Greek word, phosphorus, is represented by 6 different Hebrew words. This is laziness on the side of the translators. They could not go back and correct their mistake. Why? Well, because you've latched onto a whole creature. You've made it a god. How do you write a god out of the scripture? Again, the words twilight, eyelid, dawn, morning, dayspring. Yeah. So in the Greek, all 6 of these Hebrew words are translated into Greek. The Greek word phosphorus does not mean morning. The Greek word for daybreak and for dawn, which is used about 26 times in the Greek, is orthros. Genesis 19:15, Genesis 32:26. Thus, the above Hebrew words, alpha and bogar and shakar and mishar, would all have been translated more accurately by the Greek word othros than by phosphorus. Translating the Hebrew nesphith into phosphorus in the Greek was clearly a mistake, which even Jerome recognized. And that is why Jerome therefore translated this correctly into Latin as vesper, meaning evening. That leaves the one Hebrew word hallel that is also mistranslated in the Greek as phosphorus. Hallel really does not have anything to do with bringing anything. It's simply not about bringing or carrying anything, be it light or be it anything else. But this is typical of the extremely poor quality of the Greek translations. Here they have indiscriminately translated 6 different Hebrew words with the one Greek word, phosphorus. It is the same as the Greek indiscriminately translating 15 different Hebrew words with the one Greek word, haspis. The Greek language in the Old Testament is very poor quality and highly unreliable translations. That's the kindest thing that we can say about the Greek Septuagint. However, one thing should already be very clear. The fact that the Greek is incorrectly used and the Greek word phosphorus to translate 5 different Hebrew words should tell us that the Greek is also wrong in translating the Hebrew word hallel into the word phosphorus. It is not as if hallel somehow really means the same as phosphorus. And that is just that of the other 5 words are incorrectly translated. Furthermore, if phosphorus really was a correct translation for one of these 5 Hebrew words, then it would automatically mean that therefore phosphorus must be wrong, to be the wrong translation for Ha'el, since Ha'el has nothing, absolutely nothing at all to do with any of the other 5 Hebrew words. Ha'el is a different word, which a totally different meaning. It has nothing, again, to do with the morning. So what did Jerome do with his Vulgate translation? Jerome recognized that the Greek mistranslated 1 Samuel with phosphorus, and so he correctly supplied the right word, the vesper, in there. Jerome also recognized that the Greek mistranslated Job 3:9 as phosphorus, and so he correctly supplied the word aurori for this verse. He also recognized that the Greek mistranslated Job 38 and Job 41 with phosphorus. So he correctly supplied the Latin words delicio and delicii for these 2 verses. But Jerome did not recognize that the Greek translation of phosphorus for the Hebrew bogar in Job 11:17 was a mistranslation. So he stayed with the Greek rendering and supplied the Latin word Lucifer here. This is a mistake. The word bogar means morning, and Lucifer does not mean morning. Jerome also did not recognize that the Greek translation of phosphorus for the Hebrew mishar in Psalms 110 was a mistranslation. So here he also followed the Greek and supplied the Latin adjective Luciferum. Thus, it is also a mistake. The Hebrew mashkar means of dawn, and Luciferum does not mean of the dawn. You see this? So consider also that all 6 different Hebrew words were indiscriminately translated. It's only the Hebrew Ha'el refers to a specific being. The other 5 words refer to certain conditions, but Ha'el is used to describe an individual. It has nothing to do with the other 5 words. And so in Isaiah 14:12, that this Hebrew word Ha'el is ever used. So there is no other direct reference in the Old Testament to help us to understand what this word is supposed to mean. This word Ha'el, Jerome, in his Latin translation, blindly followed the flawed Greek translation, and therefore simply translated the Greek word phosphorus correctly into Latin as Lucifer. This is also a mistake. Jerome wasn't supposed to translate the Greek word phosphorus. He was supposed to translate the Hebrew word Ha'el, but that is something Jerome did not do. Furthermore, Jerome simply must have been aware of his mistake, because Jerome also used the word Lucifer to refer to a different individual in the New Testament. Jerome used the word Lucifer to refer to 2 complete different individuals. Did you know that? Thus, Jerome himself clearly knew that his translation of the whole Bible, that he had used the Latin word Lucifer as a name of one individual in the Old Testament and as a reference to a completely different individual in the New Testament. Jerome was obviously clearly aware of this conflict. Thus far, we have seen 2 places in the Latin Vulgate where the word Lucifer was used in the Old Testament. Lucifer never should have been put into anything. It is a made-up name. The other made-up names of the devil, of Lucifer, is the devil, also known as Satan, Beelzebub, Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness, Mr. Scratch. Old Nick is a cloven-hoofed, pitchfork-wielding, red-skinned, horn king of hell, founder of rock and roll music. He's also a gambler and a businessman, willing to make bets and contracts with you and grant you wishes, musical abilities in exchange for your immortal soul. What bullshit. Why Lucifer? Why? Here's how it started. In Roman astronomy, Lucifer was the name given to the morning star, the star we now know by another Roman name, Venus. The morning star appears in the heavens just before dawn, heralding the rising sun. The name derives from the Latin term lucifera, bringer or bearer of light. In the Hebrew text, the expression used to describe the Babylonian king before his death is Hael, son of Shahar, which can best be translated as day star, son of the dawn. The name invokes the golden glitter of a proud king's dress and court, much to his personal splendor, earned the king Louis, as we know, the 16th of France, the appellation, the Sun King. You see how this works? Got nothing to do with the boogeyman. Some kind of, fallen angel. The scholars authorized by the King James translated the Bible into the current English did not, by the way, we should say Sir Francis Bacon, did not use the original Hebrew text, but used versions translated largely by St. Jerome, and he was also the one who forged, are you ready for this, Josephus's work. Same cat went in there and forged it. And no one today has corrected. You see, there is no Jesus, never existed. But again, just like there's no devil, there's no Satan, there's no Lucifer, all created. So because of Jerome's mistake in the 4th century, Jerome had mistranslated the Hebraic metaphor, day star, son of dawn, as Lucifer. And over the centuries, the metamorphosis took place. Lucifer, the morning star, became a disobedient angel, cast out of heaven to rule eternally in hell. Theologians, writers, and poets interwove the myth with the doctrine of the fall. And in Christian tradition, Lucifer is now the same as Satan, the devil, and ironically, Prince of Darkness. Yeah. Oh, by the way, do you know when the Nicene Council met that the reason why you see pictures with angels with wings is because of 3 votes. The other half said, no, there's no evidence that any of these angels had wings. So Lucifer is nothing more than an ancient Latin name for the morning star, the bringer of light. That can be confusing for Christians who identify Christ himself as the morning star, a term used as a central theme in many Christian sermons. Jesus referred to himself as the morning star in Revelations 22:16. I, Jesus, have sent my angels to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright and morning star. He's Lucifer. You getting this? And so there are those who do not read beyond the King James Version of the Bible who say Lucifer is Satan. So says the Word of God. This is a lie. Excuse me, folks. I hear dogs. They'll get over it. Hold on. Okay. This is a lie. The original lie. There is no Lucifer. Never was. Never will be. Nor Satan, only a figment of man's imagination. Hold on, so folks, 1 second. Okay. He's a good watchdog. So Lucifer does not exist. It's totally made up. You see, folks, in order for the story to work, they had to create this character. Otherwise, they don't have anything. There's nothing to blame this on other than God. Now, a dose of reality. Is this the way it was supposed to be? You know, the Catholic Church worships Lucifer, and they say that Jesus is Lucifer's son. So now we're going to see this biblical God, right? So God's only solution, the biblical God, the God of the Quran and virtually every religion I have found, their only solutions is murder. Now that's no God, folks. This is a list of everything Yahweh, Jehovah, however you want to call it, the Father, the one that Jesus is referencing to. Here is his account, his indictment of murder. Genesis 6:6 is the account of God saying that he will murder all human beings. He created us. His only solution, murder? Because we didn't, apparently, failed to follow him. Genesis 11:6, because of this intrusion, it resulted in the deaths of millions of Homo sapiens. Read all of these. Genesis 14, murder, killing is now widespread. Even Abram was commanded to kill sapiens, other humans. This is also the biggest oversight of theologians, for in this passage it gives clue to yet a greater and longer-lived culture of the Sumerians, even before the garden metaphor. Genesis 18:19, the mass murder of Sodom and Gomorrah by God. Genesis 20, we're studying with the different sets of eyes, genocide. Genesis 21, God of the Jews is the same God of Islam. Genesis 22, human sacrifice of Isaac. God 25, God hates Esau before he's born. You see, he commands not to hate, not to kill, not to murder, not to rape, but then he commands his followers to do exactly that. Here we go again. Exodus 4:24, God met Moses, and it said that God sought to kill Moses. Exodus 7, Moses is made to be God. Did you know that? Many people pass that right up. Exodus 18-13, the plagues were the death of 1,000 sapiens took place by the command of Yahweh. Exodus 14, Yahweh's murders more humans. Exodus 17, the murder of the Amalek race. It was genocide. God commanded the Israelites to kill them, to cut the babies out of the wombs. Exodus 20, this God reveals itself as true natures in verse 5, verse 13, you shall not commit murder. These are the 10 commandments, supposedly. Exodus 21, slavery is condoned, is approved by God. Exodus 22, the approval of murdering of a female. Exodus 24, the initiation of blood. Exodus 29, animal blood sacrificing is introduced. Exodus 31, transference is taking place from one species to another to a lesser species. Exodus 32:7. How odd this is not quoted more. God said to Moses, go down, for your people whom you brought out of Egypt. This Yahweh makes no claim of these people, but implies that Moses is the God. That's very strange. And again, we continue to go through the book of Exodus. Now we get in the book of Numbers. It says again, this God has murder in his heart. Numbers 25, Baal worship, 8 murders by the high priest of Yahweh, and 24,000 people murdered by the plagues of Yahweh. Baal didn't kill anyone. Exodus 30, God Yahweh gives the command to commit genocide against the Midianites. And it is written, go forth and execute the Lord's vengeance. They slew every male. And it goes on to say, Moses says you have to let the women live. Then Moses then gave the command to kill every male and every child. Every woman who had not laid with a man would be put into the sex trades. They were made sex slaves. Here in Exodus 32, God Yahweh goes against his own sworn oath. Folks, it goes on. I can go on from the entire book of Joshua and on forward. Here is the point. The Old Testament is filled with Homo sapiens blood being shed and sacrificed on behalf and by the order of this Hebrew God and the New Testament God. In all of the scriptures researched, there is not one single reference to Lucifer or Satan ever commanding the killing, the genocide, or the murder, or the rape of one single Homo sapien, not one human. In all the scriptures research, there is not one single reference again. From 600 AD to 2000 AD, nearly 1 billion people, human Homo sapiens, have been murdered at the command of the Christian church and by, I have to say as well, by the Islamic God in the name of their God, in this case, Jesus. It doesn't exist, folks. It's made up. And if it did, it has shown itself to be far more benevolent to humans than any of the religions of the day. So I ask, who is the enemy of sapiens? And there you go. Yeah. Now, if you want to have a rebuttal on this, then you show me any scripture from any religion that Lucifer, Satan, or the devil killed one human being. It doesn't exist. So we have a dilemma here. We know that there are aliens in the Vatican. Who are they? What are they? And we know that there is no Lucifer. There is no Satan. So, I mean, this is like a schizophrenic threatening to commit suicide. It's a hostage situation. We're boxing ourselves. Now, I do not disagree that there is not energies. You can call them evil. But as far as a central character, doesn't exist. And I dare say much of what we read coming out of the Dark Ages, the early Renaissance period, is hogwash based upon, you can see why their minds were infected. They were contaminated. They couldn't write magic if they tried to fart one out of their ass. Why? Because even Crowley, all of them, this is the problem with magic. It's all predicated upon a false narrative. How the hell do you perform invoking a demon when the freaking demon doesn't exist? How do you invoke Lucifer, Satan, and like the Church of Satan? It doesn't exist. But because people believe it, as a man thinketh in his heart, so he is, man has created and invented these creatures. It's serious. And I stand by my research. And there isn't any way you're going to convince me otherwise. You know, I was in that belief for nearly 50 years. And it doesn't take that much, folks, to find out what I found out. Yeah, you got to dig. You know, you're going to be spending some, probably depends how deep you go. Could be 100 hours, could be 1,000 hours, but where you will arrive will be at the same platform and you'll meet the rest of us. And you're going to have a smile on your face because there are no bad guys. At least not the ones that we've been taught. Now, there are much more insidious forces at work here besides anything. Yes, that's right, Lois. This is just fact, folks. Yet we're in a delusional existence here. There's times when I just shake my freaking head and I'm going, this is crazy. I want out of this insanity. This is the insane asylum down here. You try to tell people and they're so rooted to these false beliefs that they'll kill you. It's time we wake up, folks. The enemy is not who we've been taught. It's not who we've been said is the enemy. I contend, ladies and gentlemen, there's something far more malevolent back behind all of this. And it's dark. But we have got to break ourselves out of this. And when you do, You're going to start gaining your sovereignty. You're going to start gaining your courage. You will become a warrior, just like our good friend Kent Nichols. You'll get out there. You'll start doing spiritual warfare because you now need to know who it is you really are facing. And let me tell you what happens. Things get quiet. They don't come around anymore. Why? Because I believe that when this knowledge gets into a person's spirit, their soul, their memory, their consciousness, your light changes. Yeah. It makes you one of the special ones. I do believe that there is a light, a metamorphosis that changes because you're flushing out so much fear. And what you begin to find yourself is that you begin to find just how powerful you really are. Okay, folks, hope you enjoyed it. This is kind of our review week, and so we're going to be going through more of this. And when you begin to see this, and then you begin to add on to the rest of what we have studied, that's why studying Lilith was not a problem for me. I mean, you know, if there's an existence to Lilith, I'd say it was more, you know, foundational and valid than Lucifer or Satan. And the gal just needed her story told. She was screwed over. But that's just it, folks. What I got out of the Liber Lilith, and we're going to study, we're going to review the Liber Lilith probably on Monday, is that she led us into something. She was telling us, you guys got it all wrong here. You're not recognizing what's really going on. And man, is her words coming to pass every day. Whew. This has been surreal. Yes, 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 I know. But I'm going to tell you what, by God, it's like a woman having sex. Oh my God, because we are the gods. I think that's what it comes down to, folks. I think we are the light beings. I think that we are in some kind of freaking prison that we don't understand, and only a very few get the glimpse of what really is there. And it seems like when they do, things begin to happen. Thank you, Twisted Isby. All right. This has been fun, I tell you. The PDF, I mean, the PowerPoint, it's my work, but I'll share it with you. If you think that that will help, many of you have written on me and asked, you know, you're dealing with family, loved ones, others that are so indoctrinated into this mindset, and you don't have the reference material. Well, that is a full one. That's nearly 75 slides that is chocked full of verifiable, documentable information. And you'll leave them pissed off. They will. They'll walk away from you because they realize they can't argue with you. Their theology just evaporates. Yeah. Okay. Oh, this has been fun. All right, folks, I'll see you tomorrow. Have yourself a great evening. Tune in tonight over on the Steiger Perspective. You'll enjoy it. And we'll meet here again tomorrow, and we'll have another review of what was done in 2019. All right. Much love to everyone. We'll talk to you soon. All right. Bye-bye.